thought we'd have a look at gold and silver because there's loads of noise about it in the press, and also our economy is wankered. That's a technical term, don't get all excited. Now, I had loads of feedback from the guilt video from people saying that I'd explained something that they'd not understood before really clearly. And I'll say the same thing about this. Don't let people stop you asking questions, because no question is stupid. You don't get taught this stuff in school. And of course, the papers don't teach you either. Now, they should, but they don't. Anyway, the point of this whole video is to show you what the government and the media won't. Every few decades or so, people realise what money actually is, usually because there's a problem with it. And it used to be based on actual stuff, but for the last few decades, it's been based on, a government promise. No, we're not doing fiat currency in this video. We're doing shiny stuff. Now, a paper IOU, like a government gilt, is only worth something if you believe the person or the government who signed it can pay it back. And right now, that belief is collapsing. Governments have printed more money in the last decade than in the previous 100 years combined, which, by the way, has made a lot of people fabulously wealthy, particularly if you owned large amounts of assets like big corporations. Anyway, I digress. The UK's debt is staggering. We've talked about this before. The UK's debt to GDP ratio, which means the amount of money the country owes versus how much it actually makes in a year, is up at about 95%. The US is way past 100%. And the interest payments alone now cost more than most defence budgets. It's crazy. So what do investors do then? Well, they look for something that can't be printed and can't be defaulted on, that doesn't depend on politicians keeping their promises. And in this case, that's gold and silver. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because most people think gold and silver prices are set by supply and demand, but they're not. They're set by paper markets, so futures contracts traded in New York and London, places like that. For every physical ounce of gold sitting in a vault somewhere, there are hundreds of ounces that are traded on paper. So some estimates, don't know if these are right, precisely, but it's good for an example. Some estimates say that over 200 claims are made per ounce. That's like 200 people all holding a receipt for the same bar of gold. Only one of them will actually get it. And if everyone demands their silver, some people are going to be very, very let down. So the system actually relies on no one ever asking for the real thing. But central banks, including China, Russia, Turkey, are asking for the real thing. They're buying physical gold and silver in record quantities. Why? Well, because they can see what's coming. A loss of faith in the West's paper promises. Normally, when interest rates go up, gold prices fall. And that's because gold doesn't pay any interest and the bonds do. As you know, we did that, right? So investors would prefer normally to invest in bonds. Not this time. See, when interest rates went up, so did gold. And that tells you something fundamental has changed. Investors don't believe central banks can control inflation or the debt. And so they're buying insurance against the system itself. They don't care if they don't get interest. They just want their money. When insurance demand rises, it means people can sense danger in the markets. Now, silver is fascinating because for decades it moved with gold, both treated as precious metals, solid, stable, kind of thing your grandparents would buy. No one thought it was an exciting market. But silver now has a dual identity, gold a little bit as well, but silver's the big one in industry because it's both money and an industrial metal. And net zero madness has supercharged demand for silver. Solar panels, EVs, high-tech batteries all depend on silver. Each electric car needs around 2 ounces of silver. A single large solar farm uses tons. Yet global silver supply is shrinking. Many silver mines have closed due to costs, regulations, and environmental restrictions, ironically imposed by the same governments that are all demanding net zero. Nope, recycling can't fill that gap either, because most silver used in solar panel farms, for example, and electronics isn't economically viable to recover. So you're seeing a rising demand and a falling supply, and it's being hoarded by governments and investors. That's why silver's volatility looks more like energy prices than the old-fashioned, boring precious metals market. Meanwhile, outside of our ridiculous Western bubble debt and your media telling you, gold prices are coming down, silver will come down, a quiet financial revolution is taking place, right? Because the BRICS nations, people like Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are openly discussing a new gold-backed trading currency. You know how it used to be? And they're serious. And the pieces are being built. China and Russia are already trading oil and gas in yen. Russia's central bank has linked its currency more closely to gold. Central Asian nations are swapping dollars for bullion. And as that system takes off, if it really does, it weakens the dominance of the dollar, and with it, the pound and the euro. Because those currencies are built on confidence, not government promises of backing. A gold-linked system doesn't need trust. It has the actual weight of the actual physical stuff. So while Western economies debate, digital pounds and green bonds, the rest of the world is building a commodities-backed alternative. And people are getting very panicky in the West about this. Because who controls the supply of those metals? Well, surprise, surprise. China refines over 60% of the world's lithium. It has 70% of rare earths, and it dominates the global processing of nickel, graphite, cobalt, all essential for net zero. Russia sits on huge reserves of palladium, platinum, and gold. And together they've created a kind of, resource cartel, using commodities as leverage against the West's dependence on their paper finance. And they're doing it deliberately. When Western governments freeze foreign reserves and impose sanctions and seize assets, countries learned a simple lesson, didn't they? They learned, don't store your wealth in dollars, store it in metal. So they did. Why do you think Trump has had to play such hardball now? You really can't leave it much longer. And all the while, your media doesn't bother reporting on the irony, do they? They don't want you to focus on the truth. The West's push for net zero has made us more dependent on the very nations we're sanctioning. Every solar panel, every EV, every wind turbine ties us deeper into Chinese supply chains. And Western mines are bogged down by red tape and environmental lawsuits, or vast swathes of land we claim to be protecting are being turned into mines in order to try and secure supply. Hello, Serbia. Hello. Your Jada Valley deal, which 87% of citizens were against, was signed away with the EU, wasn't it? So that they could dig for lithium. We built an entire energy transition that relies on materials we can't mine or refine for ourselves, and subsidies that we can't afford to pay for an industry that can't survive without them. Brilliant. So when China restricts exports, as it did recently with things like gallium, germanium, graphite, prices then surge, don't they? That's why investors are piling into hard assets. They're not just hedging inflation, right? They know we're totally incompetent and they're hedging against that. People always say gold goes up during a crisis and then it falls back when markets recover. But how can the markets recover the same way? They can't. What if this next crisis isn't cyclical, but it's structural? So we've reached the point where our debt can't be repaid, it can only be rolled over. And where money isn't backed by anything real and governments punish savers with inflation while pretending it's all under control, right? That's why gold and silver aren't just investments anymore. They're votes of confidence. Physical assets are quietly replacing paper ones in the background while the financial press still talks about, short-term corrections. Basically, we've walked into a new era of distrust. Trust is the currency that underpins everything, right? Money, markets, politics, and right now it's collapsing. Every major Western government has overpromised and overspent. The public no longer believes them, so they're turning to the oldest trust system humanity ever invented: metal. Not digital tokens, not CBDCs, no, actual atoms. And if this is true, we're witnessing a global pivot from paper promises to physical assets. Gold and silver aren't just hedges. We're signaling that the world is done pretending our economies are built on solid ground, because they're not. At the end of the day, you can't eat paper, can you? You can't plug a car into promises, but you can hold gold in your hand, and it doesn't really care who the Prime Minister is. So when you hear headlines about gold hits another record, remember this: it isn't greed driving it, it's fear. So is it time to buy gold and silver? Hey, I'm a choice chick. That's for you to decide. Let me know what you think. What do you think about the gold and silver situation? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe. We'll do it all again. Until next time.